Rich Dad, Poor Dad, The Almanac of Naval Ravikant, Profit First, and Never Split the Difference. And I read them so you don't have to. So here's what you need to know and what I learned from each one. I'm going to be super honest, the third book has probably been the one that has been most impactful and the one that has generated me the most money so far. And also thanks to Relay for sponsoring this video. I'll tell you why I use them later on. Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Maybe you've read it, maybe you haven't, but this is the type of book that honestly, every time I go back to, I get more and more nuggets. And probably the biggest learnings from this book is understanding the difference between assets and liabilities. And it goes even deeper. He actually mentions this is the biggest reason why the poor stay poor, the middle class stay in the middle class, and what sets them apart from the rich class is not knowing how to use these and the difference between them. So liabilities are everything that is taking money from you or costing you money. Credit cards, loans, debt, all those things that basically just suck the money right out. And then on the asset side is anything that is generating you money. Businesses, properties, royalties, intellectual property, and so on. Simple, right? But it doesn't stop just there. Normally people confuse what they think they have as an asset. And this is still happening today. Your home isn't an asset. It's not. It's the plain, cold, hard truth. If your home isn't generating money for you, it's a liability, not an asset. An asset would be people that have homes that rent a part out, that maybe use their garage and sell something out of it. Who knows? But if it's not making you money, it's a liability, not an asset. And this is wild because I think even today, buying a home and you have to buy a home and stop renting, buy a home. Like everyone has buying a home super glorified on this pedal when is it really still the smartest choice? Because people normally still see it as buy a home and you're set, like buy a home and you'll be good. No, like buying a home is actually a liability. You have a mortgage payment, you have interest on that. Like there's no asset until it's fully paid off. And honestly, even then. But I think the wildest lesson I got from the book isn't even that. It's probably this one right here. Because also what happens is that most people start to confuse their business for an asset. Yeah, I have a business. I started this, I do that. I have my coffee shop. If a business requires you to actively work in the business, it's a job, not a business. And I think this was mind-blowing to me because it really reminds you of the importance of creating assets and more assets and businesses that lean more towards the passive side. But that's a whole nother story, so let's move on to number 2. The Almanac of Naval Ravikant, another book that I honestly recommend going back to at least once a year. And there's no excuses because it's actually free. Like it's on Spotify, it's everywhere for free. So if you want the link, DM me on Instagram, Naval, and I'll send you the direct link. What you need to know about this book, and the biggest lesson that I took away from it, is the importance of compound interest. However, not just in terms of investing, in terms of relationship, your knowledge, wealth, and so on. The importance here, what Naval recommends to do is always think about the long term. Imagine if you started implementing a healthier lifestyle today. How would that impact your life in 10 years? In 20 years, in 50 years? And digging even deeper into knowledge, how could thinking long-term change your specific knowledge and all the skills you have? Because here's the thing, there's something from this book that he mentioned about specific knowledge that really just like tapped into me and made me realize so many things. There's education, like the basic things we learn in school that normally we don't really implement or have anything to apply that to. Then there's knowledge, but then we have specific knowledge, things that require more skill, things that not everyone knows, you know, that extra layer that you get to. And having specific knowledge is the only thing that will make you irreplaceable. Let that sink in. Specific knowledge makes you wanted for companies, in businesses and projects and investments because there's only you and a couple other handful of people that have all those skills that you have in one brain. So in the book, they actually tell this story about a diver who had special certifications and basically was one of the few people that could dive down to this site where these scientists thought there was going to be like a treasure hidden. They had found this, but even them, they couldn't get down there. So they had to add this scuba diver to their project, basically split profits with him because He was one of the few people in the world that was able to do the things he could do in order to get down there, see if that treasure was there, and then bring it up. Now, of course, this isn't telling everyone to go get their scuba certification, but it really opens up our eyes to start to think, okay, what specific knowledge do I have? Can I code? Am I an editor? Can I be on camera? Can I build a website? Do I know how to sell online? Like those things that we know long term are very useful for any business, any brand, any project. Now, the moment you've been waiting for, book number 3, which as I mentioned is the book that has brought me the most return. And we're talking about Profit First. If you're already subscribed, you've probably heard it before because I talk about it a lot. It's made for business, but it also applies to your personal life. The first years when I first started my business, I remember I would follow certain accounts that I use as inspo. And I would sit there and I would wonder, how are they paying themselves? How much are they paying themselves? Is it a set amount? Do they vary each month? How much do they know to spend on softwares, on hiring, on this and that? How much are they putting apart for taxes? Why doesn't anybody talk about this? I remember it was the first years I was in business and I was literally contemplating just sending a DM to these people hello, how much do you pay yourselves? And not knowing why it was a topic that people didn't talk about when everyone in that space had a business. And I'm sure I wasn't the only one wondering this. Well, fast forward, luckily, I found the book Profit First and I learned a lot. The book basically provides a percentage guide so you know how much you should be spending for each thing, how much you should be paying yourself, how much you should be spending on operating expenses, because even having a Google Gmail account, you have to pay for that and those things start adding up. So how much do you have available for all these things that it takes to run a business? How much do you have for taxes? How much should we be putting aside? And then on top of that, we're having a business. How do we make sure that we're not just getting paid a salary, right? Because for that, I would just go work a normal job. I'm building a business because I obviously want it to be profitable. How does that work? So those percentages give you all the answers. And no matter whether you're making $1, $1 million, 5 million, you go based off of each percentage column line. And the great part is that it's a percentage. So even if you're making $100, it's the percentage from those $100. There's no way of being wrong with this. Now, the important thing here is that it's not just about the book, but what bank you decide to pair it with. The book makes so much emphasis on not picking a bank with fees, not picking a bank that only allows you to have one account, not picking a bank that charges you for all these little things. And honestly, during my research, which took me a couple of weeks, it was hard to find a bank that didn't have all those things. And if we think about it, like I said, this also applies to your personal finances. We're supposed to know how to manage our finances when it's normalized that we only have one bank account. One bank account for your expenses, for your savings, for your investments. How are you supposed to be good at managing your money if you have everything in one thing? So that's basically the science behind the book. Not having one account, but having multiple accounts so that you can easily open up and voila, you know how much you have in operating expenses. So if you want to hire someone, it has to be within the amount that you have on that account. If not, then it's not the right moment to hire. So finally, during my research, I found Relay, and 4 years later, I get to partner with them. Back then, they had everything the book recommends you to have, but now it gets even better because they're the official banking platform for Profit First. That means you have automation so that you split your income each month, each week, however often you want to do it, into those buckets. You can do it within a click. You have no fees, no minimum balances, and it literally takes less than 5 minutes to open up an account. So I'm going to leave the link below because trust me, pairing the book with this bank has saved me money, generated me money, because I'm always setting aside a profit percentage, even from the first day that I started implementing it. And of course, it doesn't stop just there. We're headed to book number 4. Never Split the Difference. This is another book that I would honestly recommend you come back to once a year. So basically, out of the 4, there's 3 that you should probably go back to once a year. Profit First, luckily, is a thing that you leave implemented once and you're good to go for life. Now, Never Split the Difference is all about negotiating, and don't think this only applies to businesses because it definitely doesn't. I've implemented what I've learned from this book in business meetings, yes, closing clients, yes, but honestly, even with Gabe when we're deciding where to go eat. The trick here, and probably the biggest lesson, is to put yourself in the other person's shoes. Because if you're like me, I used to think that negotiating was all about acting like the dominant one, showing that you had the power, when in reality, Chris Voss says it's completely not that. And trust me, like Chris Voss is a trusted source. He's an FBI negotiator, so if there's someone that I'm going to take tips from, it's him. So for this, he recommends using the mirror technique, which is something that I have highly implemented, and I know it works. It's basically like rephrasing what the other person is saying. So not only does this get the other person to be like, oh, this person's listening, which is something that isn't common nowadays, but it also just allows the other person to get their guard down and for you to be kind of like on the same page when negotiating. So let's say I'm sitting with someone who wants to sell their house because Florida weather's just been acting up lately, like it's always raining and it's been a hassle. I'm sitting there and I'm listening to this person that's saying, I just want to sell the house, like this Florida weather, it's always raining. Using the mirror technique, what I would do is basically say, I totally understand why you would want to sell the house. Like it has been pouring in Florida lately and I totally understand why you'd want to sell your property. So that way you're basically mirroring what the person says. And with that comes the skill of learning to not assume. So you don't assume, yet you ask questions, because when you assume, normally you're automatically like throwing statements at the person. First of all, you can be wrong. Second of all, you can be like in a negotiation when maybe there's already like tension from both sides. You get that person to get their guard up, you end up just like not agreeing, and then it goes in bad directions when all you had to do was just sit there, erase any assumption that you may have, and just ask questions. Why are you selling it? What's the real reason? Like, what's the emotion behind this? Imagine if people went into negotiations knowing the emotion behind why the other person wanted to do that. Things would be completely different. This person that might be selling their dream house could be using these funds to go on their lifelong European dream trip, and you have no idea about that. So you keep making assumptions on why they can't lower the price, when if you understood that, things would be completely different. And of course, in the book, there's tons of tactical tips. I think some of my favorites are one, to use odd numbers. I think that always works. And another great technique is the 65, 85, 95 rule, which is basically knowing what your baseline is before entering a negotiation. Whether you're selling or you're on the other side, you're buying. You know what's your bottom line, or you know what's like the highest you'll go. So you know that, but you start at the 65% line. Then in the negotiation, you're like, okay, you can go up to your 85. Lastly, you can go up to your 95. And after that, like, it's your baseline, your 100 line. You can't go further from there, or if you're on the opposite side, you can't go lower from there. And if that's not working, you have to know when to leave that negotiation. That is so important to learn. And it's oftentimes not the easiest. Lastly, of course, we've heard this before, understanding how to sell the benefit for the other person and not the actual product. There's benefits, there's emotions behind tangible things, behind transactions, and getting to that is game changer in any negotiation. There you have it. I hope these 4 books generate you as much money as they have for me. And I'll see you right back here on this same channel next week. We about to make it happen.